Hello there and welcome to this video where we're going to be taking a look at a whole range of different types of mushrooms. We'll look at cultivated mushrooms, wild mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, psychoactive mushrooms, poisonous mushrooms, and towards the end we'll even take a look at some more innovative uses of mushrooms like bioremediation, packaging, making of hats and natural pest control. So stay tuned. So let's kick things off with cultivated mushrooms. These are the mushrooms that you're most likely to have come across in your life. Yeah, they're available in shops all over the world, but it is a relatively recent phenomenon that we've learnt to cultivate mushrooms in a reliable way. Although the Japanese began cultivating mushrooms nearly 2,000 years ago on logs, it wasn't until around about 300 years ago in the caves of Paris that people began to cultivate button mushrooms in a more organised way. And it really isn't until the last 50 to 100 years throughout the 1900s that we managed to work out systems to cultivate them extremely reliably in a scientific and sterile way, bringing them to the shops and enabling people to eat them every single day. So let's take a look at some of the most popular cultivated mushrooms. So let's start with the button mushrooms, the Cremini and Portabella. They're all part of the same family of mushrooms. The difference between the white button mushroom and Cremini is just that the white mushroom is a variant. They're actually the same species, and in the 1930s a grower in Pennsylvania noticed a white variety, he cloned it and created a new variety for people to grow. But they're basically the same mushroom, they have slightly different taste, and the Portabella is a mature version of either the button or Cremini mushroom, depending on which one is grown. But it has an entirely different flavour, and it's often cooked in a different way, either via grilling or in the oven. Anyway, these mushrooms are probably the most commonly cultivated in the world, and they're certainly the most easily available in the shops. So almost certainly you'll have come across them. They're a great mushroom to eat because they're so easy to cultivate and they pick up a lot of flavour for whatever you're cooking it with. However, in recent years, people have got a lot more interested in branching out into other varieties. One of the most popular other varieties that you're most likely to come across is oyster mushrooms. And these are the mushrooms that we most commonly cultivate at our farm, partly because they are one of the easiest mushrooms to cultivate for people who are beginning to grow mushrooms, and we love teaching people how to grow mushrooms, so this is a great one to start with. It's also able to grow on a whole range of different materials, and it tastes really, really good. It's really versatile to cook with in stir fries and pasta, and it's easy to cultivate on a large scale as well, which is another reason why it is commonly available in shops these days. There's also a relative of the normal oyster mushroom is the king oyster mushroom. Although it does taste and have an entirely different flavour, it's one of my favourite mushrooms actually. It's really, really meaty, it has a firm texture, lovely nutty flavour, and more this is available in shops as well, so if you get a chance to eat one, I'd highly recommend it. Next up we've got Shiitake mushrooms, also increasingly commonly available in shops. It tastes delicious, it has a really different flavour to almost all other mushrooms, I think. It's almost sort of garlicky flavour. Definitely, if you can get your hands on any Shiitake mushrooms, do go ahead and eat them. They're really tasty, and as we'll come back to in a few minutes, they're also one of the most potent medicinal mushrooms as well. Next up, we've got Enoki mushrooms, which you've probably begun to see in stores as well. In the last 2 or 3 years, they've really become quite popular, and a lot of supermarkets are now selling mixed punnets which include Enoki mushrooms. They're really unusual looking. They're grown under slightly different conditions with high CO2, which causes these long stems trying to search out to find the oxygen. And the end result is a really unusual texture. It becomes really firm, crunchy almost kind of mushroom. It's delicious in stir fries and in soups. In a similar fashion, you get Shimeji mushrooms, which are grown under similar conditions, and they're a little bit firmer in texture but have a similar kind of delicious nutty flavour. And then finally we have the Pioppino mushroom, which is a beautiful looking mushroom, really nice to eat as well, and also increasingly available. Now obviously there are more cultivated mushrooms available than the ones we've covered here. These are just the ones that are most commonly available that you're most likely to come across these days. There are obviously some other cultivated varieties cultivated for medicine, which we'll come back to in just a moment. So next up, let's look at the category of wild mushrooms. So most of these varieties are either impossible or very difficult to cultivate. People have been trying for many years to understand how they grow. Most of them grow in association with the roots of mature trees, and that's why it's particularly difficult to cultivate them, because you need them to be living in association with the tree in order for the fruits to form. So most commonly these mushrooms are foraged from the wild, they're seasonal depending on when they're available, and they usually fetch a higher price. You're more likely to find these in restaurants rather than in your supermarket, although increasingly we do see in the autumn seasons selections of wild mushrooms in supermarkets as well. So one of the most popular and iconic wild mushrooms is the Porcini mushroom, also known as the cep. This is a huge mushroom. If you ever go foraging, you might find some huge specimens of them, but they're actually best when young. They have a lovely firm texture. They're in some ways similar to a king oyster mushroom in texture, and they're really plentiful in certain forests, so they're also quite commonly available, particularly in the autumn. In a similar vein, we have the chanterelle, another iconic and extremely popular wild mushroom which grows in large amounts in certain forests. It's a beautiful little yellow trumpet, has a lovely kind of wavy edge to it, and is really popular to eat in a whole range of different dishes. Lots of people like to eat them with eggs, but also in sauces with fish or meat, or just in risotto and pasta. It's a really versatile, tasty mushroom. Next up we have chicken of the woods, an almost radioactive looking mushroom. I remember the first time I found this in the wild, I just wondered what on earth it was. It was a huge one as well, bright yellow and orange just sticking out of a tree, and I thought that cannot possibly be edible. It looks like it's going to kill you. However, I looked it up, I had a book, I was just getting into foraging at the time, and I found out that this was a really highly prized edible mushroom. Took some of it home, cooked it up, and I can see why it's called chicken of the woods. It tastes like chicken, it has a texture like chicken, it's amazing mushroom. If you come across a specimen, especially if it's young, don't take it all, just harvest some of it. You want to leave some there to enable it to propagate again. But it's a delicious mushroom if you ever happen to come across it in the wild. I've never really seen it sold, and I think that's just because it's such a big, meaty chunk of a mushroom. I just think it doesn't lend itself so well to being sold in small punnets. And we have hen of the woods, another huge mushroom with a meaty flavour and texture. This forms at the base of trees, and if you happen to come across one, you're just blown away, usually by the size of it. They're really quite big and heavy. This one actually increasingly is cultivated for eating, but also for its medicinal benefit, which we'll come back and talk about in just a minute. Another really iconic mushroom here is the morel mushroom, highly prized for its flavour, but also its rarity. In the wild, it doesn't grow all that commonly. Increasingly though, it's also a variety people are learning to cultivate, so I think over the next 5, 10, 15 years we'll probably see this much more readily available. It'll probably get cheaper to buy, and also potentially we can leave some of the wild population alone so that it has a chance to spread further and replenish wherever it exists. Now finally we've got the truffle, another really iconic mushroom with a reputation for high prices and fancy gourmet restaurants. The truffle mushroom grows under the ground, which makes it harder to find. Usually people train dogs, traditionally it was pigs, to go into woodlands in the right conditions where truffles are known to grow, and the animals will go and smell out the smell of the truffle and dig down into the soil to find it for people. Truffles, again, they grow in association with the roots of the trees, so they're not as easy to cultivate, although again in recent years people are experimenting and they have found ways to cultivate them by planting trees already inoculated with the mycelium of the truffle mushroom. So again, I think as time goes on, we'll see truffles cheaper and more readily available, which is a great thing for everybody. So moving on from wild mushrooms, we've got another category, which is medicinal mushrooms. People have been using mushrooms medicinally for a really long time, especially in the East, in China and Japan. And modern medicine is now confirming a lot of what practitioners of traditional Chinese medicine themselves have known for a long time. There's a whole range of benefits that can be received from different mushrooms. So let's take a look at some of the most popular ones. My personal favourite is the reishi mushroom. It's absolutely beautiful mushroom. Look at the colours there. It's also just such a potent medicinal mushroom. The Chinese name for it basically means the mushroom of immortality, and traditionally it was reserved just for emperors and people of high standing in society. These days it's actually a mushroom which is able to be cultivated, and so it's much more readily available. And you can find this in a whole range of different medicinal mushroom products. You can make tinctures with it, you'll find it in powders and capsules. It's used for a whole range of different health issues that people might be facing. Generally speaking, it's really good for the immune system, but people also use it if they're having problems with inflammation or energy. If you're interested in finding out more about that, we have some articles on our site about the different uses for different medicinal mushrooms. I'll put a link in the video below so you can go and read up on that in more detail. Next up we have Chaga mushrooms. These mushrooms are really unusual, kind of brown solid lump, which has been used in traditional medicine for quite a long time. Again, it's used for a whole range of different health benefits, ranging from lowering cholesterol and blood sugar levels to boosting the immune system and potentially helping to reduce the chances of cancer or slowing the growth of cancer as well. Next up we have Cordyceps mushrooms, a really unusual mushroom. In the wild it grows off of insects. It parasitizes insects, kills them, and then when the insect dies it uses the insect as its food and then puts out this weird looking mushroom that just grows out the top of it. Now, Cordyceps mushrooms have been used for many years again in traditional medicine, and these days you'll find there's a trend for people using Cordyceps mushrooms for athletic benefit. It seems to increase blood flow around the body, help people recover from injuries better, and aid in mental focus and concentration. Next up we have the Trametes mushrooms, also sometimes called turkey tail because it looks a bit like the tail of a turkey. This is a very common mushroom that you'll almost certainly come across in the wild if you go for a good number of walks in woodlands in the northern temperate hemisphere. It's a beautiful mushroom. It has this kind of zonation of colour all around it and is very plentiful as well. This mushroom is, there's an extract which originates from this mushroom used in the treatment of cancer in Japan, and it seems to have a very strong anti-cancer effect as well as a immune system boosting effect. And all of these effects that I'm talking about here, you should go away and read about them for yourself. Increasing amounts of research are being done on it. Some people will contest them, but I think we'll find as time goes on it becomes more and more accepted that they do provide medicinal benefit. Next up we have the lion's mane mushroom, also sometimes called the monkey head. So called basically because of the way it looks, with these long spines coming down, and it grows in this sort of cluster. The lion's mane mushroom these days is quite rare in many places in the wild, but it is a mushroom which is cultivated as well, so you'll find it more commonly available. Sometimes it's also called the pompon blanc. It's this kind of white looking cluster. It tastes really nice. It's also a great edible mushroom. Tastes seafoody in flavour. But it also has a great effect on our nervous system. So it's thought that for people who are suffering with Alzheimer's, for example, having regular supplements of lion's mane can help to repair the nerve tissue in the brain, as well as conveying other health benefits. So if you're interested in finding out more about that, go and check out the article on our site and read up on it. Next up, Maitake mushroom. This is actually the same as the Hen of the Woods mushroom we covered earlier in the wild mushroom section. Maitake mushroom, Maitake is just the Japanese name for it. It's used for a whole range of different health benefits. Often people take it for helping with the side effects of cancer treatment, but also for chronic fatigue, boosting the immune system, lowering the blood pressure. Again, if you're interested in any of these things, go and read up on it. There's a whole range of different benefits and different supplements that different ways of taking these mushrooms, so go and do your research on it. Shiitake mushrooms, we mentioned them earlier as one of the most popular cultivated mushrooms. It's also a highly prized medicinal mushroom Many of the same benefits that we've mentioned for the other mushrooms in terms of boosting the immune system, helping in alleviating the effects of cancer and cancer treatment, lowering blood cholesterol, lowering blood sugar levels, another really potent and easily available medicinal mushroom. So moving on from medicinal mushrooms to psychoactive mushrooms, which many people would see as a type of medicinal mushrooms for our mind. However, in most countries around the world, psychoactive mushrooms are illegal and classified as highly dangerous. Obviously, for some people, this is the case. If you're in a bad mental place, to take psychoactive mushrooms is not a great idea. However, many people have found a lot of benefit from psychoactive mushrooms over the years. The history of their use dates back thousands of years all across Central and South America. And more recently, modern medicine has found in clinical trials that there can be a lot of benefit for people who are suffering depression or anxiety, for example, at the end of their life, or if they're dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. Increasingly, their trials are showing a lot of really positive evidence that even just a single dose from psilocybin, which is the active compound in psychoactive mushrooms, can convey a long-lasting benefit for people and bring people out of depression, break addictive behavior, and help people to process traumatic experiences. And I think, even though at the moment most psychoactive mushrooms are illegal, I think we'll see in the next 10 or 15 years that the overwhelming body of evidence showing that there is some benefit to be had. I think it will change the laws and we'll start to see them used in a controlled way in clinical practices in the field of psychology. So it's definitely a mushroom you need to be a little bit careful with. In no way am I saying that everybody should take psychoactive mushrooms, but it's certainly an interesting group of mushrooms that humans have interacted with for a very long time. Another group that people have interacted with for a very long time, but not always in such a great way, is a whole bunch of poisonous mushrooms out there. There are lots of different types. I'm not going to cover them all here. Some of them have got amazing names like Destroying Angel, Death Cap, Panther Cap. Watch out for these. If you're going to get into foraging, it's really important to learn the most poisonous varieties so that you really make sure that you don't mess up. Some of these mushrooms will kill you or cause severe damage to your kidneys, respiratory system. Some really nasty consequences of taking them, very toxic, so do watch out for those varieties. Often people do end up consuming them by mistake. A number of poisonous mushrooms look like really good edible varieties, and so people that are looking for a certain variety end up picking this by mistake, don't do their identification properly, and end up in hospital losing kidneys, livers, or potentially just dying outright. Alright, so I wanted to just finish this video up by talking about a couple of more innovative and unusual uses for mushrooms beyond eating them for food or having them as medicine. And this is one of my personal favourites. This is a hat made from a mushroom. It's made from the inside material of the mushroom that you see here on the right, which is commonly called the hoof fungus or the tinder fungus. And basically the inside of that mushroom is taken out and it's sort of mixed and turned into a kind of felt, which can then be made into things like hats or placemats. You'll often see the great mycologist Paul Stamets walking around with a hat like this. It's a tradition of an area in Romania called Transylvania. So if you're interested, do check it out. There are people that sell the hats that they're making there directly from Romania online. Do a little search for Amadou hat or mushroom hat and you'll probably come across it. Here's another really interesting application of mushrooms. So there's a company in the United States called Ecovative who have found a way to create biodegradable packaging from the mycelium of mushrooms. So the mycelium is the root network of the fungus that produces a mushroom, and they found a way to basically grow this mycelium on material in a mold and then to dry it out, and the end material is something that really closely resembles polystyrene, except it's biodegradable. You know, it's made from biodegradable materials like rice husks or straw, and then of course at the end of its life it can just break back down into the soil again. And this has got a lot of attention. Some major manufacturers like Dell have been using it as the corner protection in their boxes for sending large packages around the world. And apparently the cost of producing it is competitive with polystyrene. So in the years to come, I expect we'll see an increasing amount of mushroom-based packaging out there in place of polystyrene, which is a great application. Another really interesting application in recent years has been in bioremediation, whereby mushrooms are being used to help clean up various types of pollution. So the picture you can see on your left here is from Ecuador, where there was an oil leak and the soil and the water were contaminated with the oil. And it appears to be the case that the mycelium was able to break down the complex hydrocarbons in the oil and help to clean up the environment there. It's a very new area of study, but as we go into the future, I'm sure it's something that will be applied in more situations. And similarly, another recent discovery was that of a plastic-eating fungus. I think it was found in Pakistan. Some researchers have now found more than 50 varieties of fungi that are able to break down plastic. So this is something we can imagine maybe further into the future, an application whereby fungi are able to help us to reduce all the plastic waste that we're currently producing. Finally, I want to leave you with this really interesting and inspiring application of another type of mushroom, and that's in natural pest control. So many of you will be familiar with the fact that bees have been declining in recent years in large amounts. Many colonies have been declining 30–40% per year. And this is a really big problem. Of course, bees are absolutely crucial to our natural environment to pollinate the flowers, both in nature but also in crop production. So losing bees is a huge problem, and there's a number of different causes for their decline, one of which is a parasite which is living on the bee and causes it a lot of problems to its health. There's been research recently come out to show that you can use a parasitic fungi to parasitize the parasite. So the thing that is causing harm to the bees can have a fungal application applied to it which kills it off and relieving the bee of that pest and helping the bees to thrive. And also another study has showed that the bees themselves can derive a benefit from drinking an extract containing different varieties of medicinal mushrooms in, and it seems to be that it provides additional food and potentially medicine to the bee's immune system to fight off infections and pests, which are some of the causes behind their decline. So I find this really inspiring to think that humans are evolving, developing new applications for mushrooms beyond just food, working out how they can be utilised for the wider ecosystem benefit. Alright, so we've covered a wide variety of different types of mushrooms here. And if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I just want to introduce you to a new film that's recently come out, which I think you'll find really fascinating. The film is called Fantastic Fungi. It's absolutely beautifully shot by Louis Schwartzberg. I'll just show you a short example here of the kind of footage you're seeing. It loads of amazing time-lapse footage below and above the soil of mushrooms developing, discussion with experts in the field about the role that mushrooms play in nature, the benefits that they infer to people. I haven't had a chance to see it yet because it's not available online to watch and there's no showings anywhere near me in the UK. But have a look on the website here, it's fantasticfungi.com. I'll leave a note underneath this video. If you're anywhere near a major city in the US, you'll probably find it available to watch. And if you're watching this at some point further into the future, I know it's going to be available online sometime in 2020, so keep an eye out for it. It's one of those films I think that's just going to push mushrooms further into the limelight for a lot of people that maybe don't know much about them at the moment. Alright, that's it for today's video. Thanks a lot for joining us. Do consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already, and we'll see you soon.